housing and urban development is guaranteed by the city of Miami and Miami-Dade County. News reports show that they haven't made any payments on the loan. They also haven't had an additional loan for approximately 10 or 11 million, which grew to about 15 million because apparently they weren't making payments on that loan either. That loan was originally with Union Planners, sold to HSBC Bank, and subsequently bought by the investors that are targeting the site now. As part of Jungle Island getting control of the site, they promised to hire local workers. Data that we've seen shows that they hired very, very few workers, considerably less than they promised. They also promised to pay rent, which they refused to do for many years, particularly during the recession. Apparently they're up to date now. They were also supposed to pay real estate taxes, which for years they refused to do. And rather than being the attraction that people were used to in Pinecrest, as you all know, they turned a large part of the site into a catering hall. It's fairly expensive to go there. I don't know if any of you have been, but it's $40 for an adult and $33 for children. And adults are defined as anybody that's 11 and up. Parking's like $10, and then there's many add-on fees. If you want to see a monkey or a talking parrot or a lemur, you got to pay another $5 or $6. You know, it's sort of like an airline. So in any case, the promoters whose names are at the top, they're trying to flip the lease to somebody else. And whoever takes it over, something will have to be done with the debt. And the debt is rumored to be close to $60 million. The revenues are allegedly fairly strong, but they haven't been keen on using the revenues to pay the rent, real estate taxes, or to enhance the 18-acre site the way they promised. Now there's a few other things also happening on Watson Island, and as David mentioned, all of this impacts the city of Miami Beach, because the more height and density you have on Watson Island, it has the negative effects on the city of Miami Beach. I mean, I just drove here from 69th and Biscayne, and it takes 30-35 minutes, which is a bit of a long drive for September, this time of the year. And things could only get worse if everything is built out on Watson Island. You've heard presentations on Island Gardens many times. That's the project that's 14 or 15 years behind schedule. All they've built is a high-end marina. They're waiting to build 2 towers, and it's been a huge problem for the city of Miami and for Miami-Dade County residents. There's Chalks Airport. Many of you might remember the seaplanes. The new gentleman, the new promoter that has control over the Chalks lease, he's not very interested in running it as an airport. He wants to put in clubs and bars on the site. And he has plans for a 9-story building, which is essentially just designed to sell alcohol, and a 240-foot tower attached to the building, which is just a light tower to attract attention. So he thinks something like Mangoes on the Bay, or some monster club, concentrated on this one site that was originally leased out to be for an airport. There's another group that has control of part of the site for a heliport. So, and then there's the 2 charter schools. Children's Museum is now 2 charter schools with 525 students. That wasn't contemplated when the City of Miami voters voted to lease the site to the Children's Hospital, but promoters were able to exploit a loophole in a poorly drafted contract and converted the museum into 2 charter schools. Again, a little bit sad, but all of which affects the city of Miami Beach as the area gets. Yes, and Island Gardens proposes hundreds of thousands of square feet of shopping, which will attract people from both the beach and Miami. assuming it goes forward. But the city of Miami has not been a good neighbor. The commissioners approved 2 illegal LED billboards on Watson Island on 3 sides of the Children's Museum Charter School. All of you, I'm sure, have seen them. They're very obnoxious. They're visible from miles away, from 270 degrees. And then you have the tunnel. I don't know if any of you have ever used the tunnel, but all of this, as things get busier, will impact the city of Miami Beach. I have the email addresses for the city of Miami elected officials. Any of you are free to email any of them just to let them know how you feel about the issues. And an alternative might be to convert the Parrot Jungle site into a park, or it could be used for parking for Miami Beach or commuter parking. Buses and shuttles could pick up people on Watson Island. Commuters could park their cars there and vice versa. There are many options. It's probably a better use for the 18 acres than more monster development. It's a good question. Fisher Island keeps expanding with more condos and more people. I haven't talked to anybody there about this particular issue. And there's a little picture on the second page, that shows you another view of Watson Island.
Do they intend to the Parrot Jungle or do away with it?
It's not clear. From the interviews, Thomas Regalado, Commissioner Ken Russell, it appears clear that the developers want to get as much height and density as they possibly can. They mentioned hotels. I don't think that they have much interest in maintaining the Parrot Jungle because it's probably not as profitable as some other schemes that they contemplate.
I'm just curious so that we, the listeners, can get our arms around it. What are the revenues?
That's a great question. The Miami Herald article says that they have about 400,000 to 500,000 visitors. And $40 a person, I think that's about $15 million or more. And then added to that, they have revenues from catering. So I don't know what the real number is because it's private and what they're.
So they haven't come out with the net revenues, and they haven't come out with what's left over. So we don't know what their expenses or anything about that. Who are the owners of this facility, and what did they get from their property in Pinecrest?
The 2 promoters for Parrot Jungle are listed at the top of the page, Fern Levine and Ron Prongo. And you can Google both of them. Fern Levine, I believe we'll say, Fern Levine at the top of the page. And Ron Prongo was sort of a promoter, speculator. And they gave up their site in Pinecrest, and the town, I think, ended up buying it. There was some money involved, but whatever the money was, it wasn't sufficient to do what they wanted to do in Watson Island, and they were able to persuade the federal government to give them a loan for $25 million.
But do we know what the town of Pinecrest paid?
Yeah.
I think it was $6 or $7 million.
For that site? That's all they paid?
The site was, let's see, 20 acres, I think. At the time, it was a lot of money for sales in Pinecrest. Around 2004, 2005.
They had some nice facilities there.
Well, the issue is that they got control as tenants, not as owners of the Watson Island site. So even though it's owned by the city of Miami, and the state of Florida has some rights over it too, because they were the original owner of the site. They provided it to the city of Miami. they're now the tenants. And even though they don't have a simple right to the property, they're trying to sell or flip or assign their lease to this new group. And apparently, really what they would like to get out from under is the debt obligations. They took on a lot of debt. Whatever revenues or net income they've been receiving over the last 10 or 15 years, I guess they've been living very well. Either that or the revenues are less than as described in the Miami Herald.
It looks like they've been playing a shell game, haven't they?
Well, a lot of people are asking questions. Any other questions? In the city of Miami, that would be Ken Russell, the new commissioner. Yes, that's right. He took over the seat from Mark Sarnoff. Mark.
You talked last year about development on Watson Island, the city of Miami Beach got engaged, they did a traffic study. Do you know what became of that and how that?
Oh, that's a great question. You're absolutely right. The commissioners voted unanimously to do a traffic study, and they voted unanimously to take all steps necessary to fight the supersizing of the Island Gardens site to the extent legally feasible. I know that it took like a year. There were delays in the parking study, went back and forth, and I'm not sure it's ever been released to the public. And I don't know why. It's a great question because now it's maybe a year and a half later, and a traffic study should have been done just in 3 or 4 months maximum. It's a great question, and I did email Steve Hurwitz, who's obviously fighting Island Gardens. He's been fighting Island Gardens for 13, 14 years. He's in Washington, D.C., so he wasn't able to come today. And he's following all the issues closely, but I don't know the answer to that one. Somebody might want to discuss with the city of Miami Beach, elected officials, the city of Miami Beach trying to take over that lease. If you think that it would be beneficial for transportation, for prevailing shuttles, buses, commuters, as well as converting as much of that site as possible just to a park. I think everybody's complaining about traffic, gridlock, overdevelopment. We probably should try to expand our park system both in Miami Beach and in Miami while we still have an opportunity. Does anybody think it might be a good idea to have a public park on that approach, on that Watson Island approach? Well, you can certainly email the City of Miami elected officials. Well, the City of Miami Beach might have to step up. Something would have to be done with the debt. Does anyone have any experience with Parrot Jungle? Have anybody visited or had young children that visited?
I did, yeah. About 50 years ago, maybe 60.
Before the move to Watson Island? What do you think?
The problem is I compare it to the old.
Many people had great memories of the original site. Right. Frank, would you like to?
Also, when you talk about their income, they also have concessionaires that they get part of. They sell, food, drinks, wherever. So they have income that, they didn't even mention. Protection, if they get a dozen, besides
yes, it's, you know, Mr. Bloomberg, Stuart Bloomberg had some negative comments in the Miami Herald article about Parrot Jungle. He said it's been poorly marketed and just never caught on. I'm not familiar with their numbers. I guess it's a privately held company and it's not open, they're not open to the public. But the important thing is that people should be wary if this lease gets assigned or sold to a group that has the wherewithal or the lobbyists that are able to build it out every inch of the site. Massive high-rises, office buildings, or shopping, whatever the worst thing you can imagine. Whatever's most profitable is what they'll be asking for.
Will anything ever be able, when they're finished, will anything ever be able to move on the MacArthur Causeway? Will it still be a causeway?
You know, people who may be headed to Miami Beach might get discouraged from the traffic and just pull off right into Watson Island and not drive the rest of the way to the beach. Frank? Of course.
So, Peter, can I give you my perspective?
Of course.
Is that okay? There are two legal ways to slow down or prevent overdevelopment on Watson Island. One is through private litigation, and the other is through action of the cognizant local governing bodies. Now, the problem with private local action is that a private group, the Coalition Against Causeway Chaos, has already expended in the neighborhood of $1 million in an attempt to prevent the overdevelopment on the south side of Watson Island, which is the Flagstone development. And the major legal hurdle that the developers threw in their path was the question of legal standing. And under the current interpretation of the law by the City of Miami Council, it requires special standing for someone who does not own the property to litigate. That particular issue is now caught up in an action against the collusion of the City of Miami Council with the developers. So we see there is behind the steps collusion when multi-million-dollar projects are involved. So the private route to preventing this is infeasible. I don't think people who are donated to the nonprofit or any nonprofit would have the stomach anymore. So I think the issue comes down to a political action. And the key players in this are the City of Miami commissioners. And I haven't followed the votes on this. I think there's at least one commissioner opposed, and maybe you can get two others. You're probably the expert on that. Let me turn to the Miami Beach side of the equation. Watson Island is outside of the jurisdiction of Miami Beach. So the avenue the city was looking into a year and a half ago, when a group of us managed to get the city commission to authorize an expenditure of $200,000 for a traffic impact study in the Flagstone development. The city attorney at that point laid out an avenue by which the City of Miami Beach could be effective in either stopping or downsizing the Flagstone proposal. Under Florida law, if a municipality is engaged in a legal action against another municipality, the first avenue to be taken is mediation. So our hope was that armed with this traffic study, which could show violation of planning and comprehensive plan and impact requirements, the city of Miami Beach could then put into mediation with the city of Miami the magnitude of the project. And one of the ideas that I put on the table, but wasn't carried any further, because the city of Miami Beach's attention has now turned elsewhere, was a requirement that the only parking on the development sites on Watson Island could be for service vehicles, and that private visitors and customers would have to be served by shuttle as a negotiating. But what has happened? What's happened in Miami Beach is that there has been a significant shift in the political theme. Commissioners now are boosting positivism, and some of them are very specific in accusing public advocates like myself of never saying anything good about the city. Right now, an oversimplification of this can be that the mayor has legitimately taken some forward strides in sea level rise, but would like to focus on the positives of the city. Sea level rise and the streetcar project as a huge advancement. So for the past year and a half, even though an initial traffic impact study on the Crockett Causeway was done, the city has not accepted it, is sitting on it, and in my judgment, there really is no political will, because it would put us into a negative. So the avenue, I believe, is the ballot box in the 2017 election. And the question is whether adverse impacts can suddenly get attention. And right now, the city's population is dormant. There is no really coherent assessment of what overdevelopment is bringing. In fact, on tomorrow's City Commission agenda, there are 4 items of upzoning. The first 2 would be an upzoning of the huge parcel of land at 500 Alton Road, a change in the comprehensive plan and a change in zoning that would upzone it for a transit hub. Public hearing at 10 a.m. on that, and at 11 a.m. it'll be much later. And at 11 a.m. there's another 2 major items, a comprehensive plan amendment and a zoning amendment, that would provide to developers an additional 50 feet and 5 stories for the development of transit hubs on any city-owned piece of land, park, any other city-owned, and the zones abutting 5th Street, Washington Avenue, 17th Street, and Alton Road, which is the streetcar route. So instead of a city which is taking stock of overdevelopment, it's saying the answer to overdevelopment is more overdevelopment by giving developers a bonus for a phony intermodal transit facility that does not even require a transit to a train. That is, you can park and take a bus, you can get off a bus and take a different bus, and you qualify. So I think we're faced with educating the public, which is going to be terrifically difficult. And probably the only way to educate the public is to explain these issues in such a way that the public catches on to them and becomes a factor in the political campaign next year. I know I sound discouraging, I am discouraged, but I think that's the avenue. Now, how do you educate the public? Right now, the only movement that, at least inferentially, deals with the question of traffic impacts is the movement we discussed, was it last week, with Robert Landsberg, who's putting together an organization to expose the adverse impacts of the Miami Beach streetcar project. So that's, and that necessarily gets you into the issue of, will it reduce congestion, what are the traffic counts, what's coming in over the profit. So I see that as the only grassroots, visible avenue to deal with all of these contributing factors. Thanks, Peter. You want to comment on
Can
that?
I ask you a question? Do you know what's going on with the Burger King lot? They have got as a traffic cover.
Okay, so the question is, what's happening with the Burger King site, which is on the south side of 5th Street at Alton and 5th? Burger King, Pier 1, and immediately adjacent is a city-owned parking lot. That particular site, under the ordinance and comprehensive plan change up for first reading on the Wednesday City Commission agenda, would be entitled to as a matter of right, a 50-foot, 5-story height increase. And because the city had previously, in public meeting, said they were interested in that as a transit intermodal stop, it's a prime candidate for a development of significant size under a development agreement between the private property owner and the city. And the best example we have of that kind of development is the very detailed proposal for two 530-foot high towers on the marina site, which currently is built up to a height of only 35 feet with Montes. So this is clearly a right target for a development agreement. The only public input into the development agreement is if the floor area ratio would be increased. But right now there is no legal impediment to 5 commissioners voting in favor of a height increase of any height. So the Burger King site, Burger King and Pier 1 Imports were owned by Jim Silver, who sold them a couple of years ago. I don't know the details, someone said a doctor bought them. And the city had been negotiating to purchase those properties. But the better way for the city to accomplish these objectives is not to spend any money, but to enter into a development agreement where the city monetizes its zoning power so that the private developer, such as the marina proposal, would make such a fortune over development. In the case of the marina, the draft development agreement calls for a $100 donation to the transit fund. That's really the blueprint for the development of the Burger King site.
You know, it's interesting, you know, you're talking about revenues, where governments get money. It's true the population of Miami Beach has been fairly stagnant. I think it's around 91,000 people. Is that right, Mark? It went up a little bit, went down a little bit. And I think the city, what's the city general fund budget now? 330 million? City of Miami Beach general fund budget. The City of Miami, the general fund budget is proposed to be $670 million for next year. But of that $670 million in the City of Miami, $500 million of the money goes to the employees. So out of $670 million, with 74% goes to the pay and benefit packages for city employees. So it doesn't leave that much money to buy new parks, keep the lights on, pay for gas in the fire trucks. And I think the City of Miami Beach has some similar issues. But it would be nice if the governments could use the tax dollars and make wonderful decisions, buying more park or buying more multi-level garages and doing things to solve the serious long-term infrastructure needs of the citizens. Anybody else have any questions? Mark?
Peter, you touched on the issue of overdevelopment, and that's a hot topic in Miami. Specifically, a commissioner is now calling the question whether the city attorney in Miami should be fired. I don't know if you're close to it, but given Frank's comments on overdevelopment, can you talk to that at all?
Yes, I can. As many of you probably saw in the paper, City Commissioner Ken Russell made a motion on Thursday's commission meeting on September 8th, a motion to fire the city attorney. I'll make a long story short, the city attorney's office has always been accused of being overly friendly with land use attorneys and selected lobbyists. Suspiciously close, suspiciously odd decisions coming out of the city attorney's office for the last 3 or 4 city attorneys. In this case, City Commissioner Ken Russell asked the city attorney for some emails so he could prepare for a meeting that he had in 1 or 2 days in advance. She sent him 6 emails, a topic regarding a rezoning, a replatting in Coconut Grove. He came to believe that there was more information than just the 6 emails. He made another request for the information to the IT department of the City of Miami. And the IT department found 1,600 emails and dozens. And the emails showed that the city attorney was extremely close with the land use attorney lobbyist for the developer of the replatting. But worse than that, the replatting first goes through zoning, and then it goes to the director of planning, and then it goes to a street and plats committee. At no step had anybody appealed anything legally, statutorily. The city attorney really didn't have to get involved, wasn't required to get involved because nothing was on appeal yet. She was doing it as a favor to a friend, an attorney lobbyist that had been a long-time friend of hers at Berger Singerman. And the city commissioner, Ken Russell, was very upset. He said, I need information in order to make good decisions, and you gave me 6 emails, and it turns out there's 1,600. And I'm not sure, you gave me the whole story for me to be able to make the best decision possible. He said I may have voted in favor of the replatting, maybe I wouldn't, but I need the information in order to make the decision. So due to my lack of confidence, I'm making a motion to fire the city attorney. And it was deferred till September 22nd when the commissioners are going to discuss hiring, I guess, an attorney to review the file and the emails and decide where to go, and then a vote subsequent to that. And then as damage control, the city attorney immediately took the file and turned herself into the Miami-Dade County Commission on Ethics and asked them for a ruling. And as you all know, they almost never find anybody guilty. So it was a very shrewd move on her behalf. So we'll wait and see what happens on the 22nd of September. But it's a good question. But more importantly, yes, the developers, certainly in the city of Miami, and I think in Miami Beach too, you can confirm, the planners and the administration seem to have unusually close relationship with land use attorneys, and large projects that violate or exceed code seem to somehow get approved. Yeah. you're probably all aware of instances where that's happened in Miami Beach.
Question here, does Miami Beach have any legal rights to
As Frank mentioned, the site's owned by the city of Miami, so they can sue. They have to do a settlement arbitration process first. There's a process for one city suing another. And if the city of Miami Beach wanted to be aggressive about it and hired great attorneys, they could, and if the traffic studies and the evidence justifies it, they could go forward claiming that overdevelopment would have an adverse impact on the city of Miami Beach. But they'd have to have the political will, and of course there'd have to be some evidence based on traffic studies and other professional reports to justify it. As Frank said, there doesn't seem to be much political will in Miami Beach because the administration likes to have everything be sort of positive or feel good or be big project based. While there was that unanimous vote a year and a half ago and very powerful statements from the commissioners, I don't think we haven't heard anything so aggressive from them since. And we haven't seen the traffic study that was ordered a year and a half ago.
common sense would tell you that there's going to be more traffic than there is now? With one development, or the two developments on either side of the market, it's going to be impossible to go to Miami Beach and
Yes, you're absolutely right. The Island Gardens, the Blackstone project, they propose a massive project. And if they're unable to get financing through the current group, Blackstone, they have to sell the project or joint venture. Whoever comes in is going to want to supersize it, maximize it. We know there was these ones.
increase the retail space from 250,000 square feet to 400,000. Just the impact of that on traffic is enormous.
Yes, you're absolutely right. A new monster retail mall, supersized, on steroids, plus the hotels and the timeshare units, and the marina athletes, anecdotally, we all know, and much more traffic.
Add parajungles space to that.
Yes, the 18 acres of parajungle, somebody with, European money, the office in Aventura, they're not going to really care about the quality of life of going to the beach. They're going to want to maximize their return to their investors.
There must be at some point a life safety issue because we do have hurricanes, although we haven't had them recently. We are in a hurricane zone. So wouldn't that require the county to take into consideration the impact of traffic and lack of movement?
I guess we need a champion, an elected official, be actively involved in this issue with the city of Miami Beach or Miami-Dade County or the city of Miami. Really needs an elected official to treat this issue as a big priority.
Peter, for your information, we had Rigoletto over here, and his excuse was, well, it takes just a few more minutes. His claim that it was 5 minutes more that he had to go, and that's what he estimated. So he was not very friendly. He was pro this development, surprisingly. No, I'm talking about Rigoletto. Thomas Rigoletto. I have the recording. That's the thing, and it surprised me because really you want things always to run smoothly. In this case, they're not. There's going to be, if this ever goes through, there's going to be a lot of people that are not going to be very happy at all, and it will require a lot of money to sort of correct that mistake.
The ability to sue, standing, very, very crucial issue. Suing local governments for bad behavior, for violations of their city charters. It's true, it's almost impossible to win in the city of Miami because you get attacked not on the merits of the case, but for the lack of standing. There's going to be a voter referendum question in the city of Miami to give residents standing so they will be able to sue when they see impropriety or violations of the city charter. I don't know if it will pass. We hope it will. Grace Solares has been the champion of that. She ran for commissioner for the seat that Ken Russell ultimately won. She's a wonderful advocate. She's the president of the Urban Environment League and also Miami Youth United. And so in Miami, we will all be fighting to get that referendum passed. I'm sure there'll be developers, of course, be fighting against it. But I don't know what the standing is in the city of Miami Beach. Can residents sue? And do they lose the suits over standing in Miami Beach, Frank? Standing is a big issue statewide.
Next to the convention center, the canal is, there's a big scaffold that's over the top. And the working crew there every day. What are they doing there? What else are they building over the canal? Right at the end of the convention
The
center.
question is, there's scaffolding over the canal north of the convention center near Washington Avenue. South of the high school. Does anybody know what the scaffolding is there for?
I had a problem with that bridge not being safe. They shored it up, maybe replace it. I don't know. Lynn Bernstein back here.
Lynn Bernstein?
Do you know?
You know about the scaffolding north of the convention center near Washington Avenue, south of the high school? You know what the scaffolding's up for? Good question. David will have to get an answer for next Tuesday.
Maybe we could get it certainly.
Thank you all very much for listening.